I want to welcome everyone to tonight or today's Meet the Scholar event. I, Shelby, and Samita are really happy to welcome Ming-Jer Chen, who is the Leslie E. Grayson Chaired Professor at the Darden School of Business. I'm Ha Huang, and I'm a Professor of Management at ESSEC Business School. And I'm also on the STR Executive Committee. So it's a real pleasure for me to start the conversation with Ming-Jer Chen today. And I think the hardest part of my job has to be the next slide, because if you're at all familiar with Ming-Jer Chen's career, you'll know that he has been extremely productive and he has undertaken a lot of different activities, which we're going to talk about today. But you know, how to wrap that all up, and I'm not going to actually even try. What I'm going to do is put to you just what I think will be his highlights, really, of his career. And these highlights are just going to serve as the guideposts for our conversation. And so that'll help us to get started. But I also want to mention that Ming-Jer and I are both counting on you, the participants, to pose questions in the chat, to let us know what areas we might want to discuss more deeply, or whether we've not been talking about the right things, and maybe there are additional topics and issues that you would like to bring to the fore. So if you are so moved, I really encourage you to put questions into the chat. And in the latter half of our time together, I'm going to turn to the chat and use that to pursue hopefully what will be a really interesting time for you. Okay, so with that, let me turn to, now Ming-Jer Chen was actually born and raised in Taiwan, but I'm going to cut to his time in the US when he came to get his MBA and his PhD at the University of Maryland. His first academic position was at Columbia University, and there he rose to the rank of associate professor before becoming the founding director of Wharton's Global Chinese Business Initiative. In 2001, Ming-Jer Chen joined the Darden School, where he is today. Now, you probably know and have read in your PhD program some of his papers. He is the leading authority in work on competitive dynamics, and more recently has been carving out a really interesting space around the concept of agricultural management. I just want to highlight very quickly that when I say research program, I actually mean maybe better a research platform. I point you, we're not going to go deep dive into each of these areas where he has done work, as well as the concepts that has been generated or the dynamics that he's been focusing on in his research platform. I point you to the Academy of Management Annals article and a more recent SMJ article where some of these themes are really developed in more detail. So going back to just some interesting points, let's say, of his academic career, he's been prolific both as a researcher, as well as, and this was something that I learned as I was looking into his background, is that he's also written a lot of teaching cases and technical notes. And that's probably not a surprise when we turn to the idea of agricultural management. One paper that I think we will discuss in a little bit more detail to get the backstory is your 1996 paper, Competitor Analysis and Interfirm Rivalry Toward a Theoretical Integration. There, it appeared in AMR and also won the Best Paper Award. And I think there's going to be an interesting story around the genesis of that paper. Now, Ming-Jer has also had a strong professional service commitment, and he's been the past president of the Academy of Management and a fellow, as well as a fellow of the Strategic Management Society. Again, these are just highlights. Ming-Jer's also won the Career Award for Distinguished Educator. He's been, consistently devoted to educating MBAs, executives, and you are also undertaking consulting activities for large companies, both some of them that I've listed here. Now, I want to actually end with the beginning before I turn it over to you, Ming-Jer. One of the things that I learned as we were talking prior to tonight was that you studied Chinese classics from a master teacher in Taiwan before you came, and you also played competitive basketball. Now, with hindsight, I think these 2 points about you make perfect sense given the kind of research that you do and what you're now doing with agricultural management. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to turn it over to you. And I'd like to maybe ask you to start with maybe your early experiences in Taiwan and what ultimately led you to come to the US for your education, your MBA, and then your PhD. And then we'll get going from there.
Okay. Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. Before I begin the conversation, I want to say a few words. And I think, I was humbled by your introduction. And in fact, I think the things I feel most proud of throughout my career, and let me use this quote, non-Chinese term, proud of, is I had the chance to serve the division chair and also executive committee of BPS. And I started my service, from the doctor consortium. And I think the same year, people like Jeff Ruhr and Chen attended in 1996. So let me also take this opportunity to say that, and I want to give a big thanks, to the STR executive committee, led by the division chair Kamina, and as a devoted and also member and volunteer for this division since 1986. That was my first academy experiences. Let me say that I'm deeply grateful for everything that you have done, especially during the past few months, during the most tough time in our history, and I was truly amazed by the wide range of activities that you all have collectively worked together and developed, and including the Stronger Together, and even that marketing buzz, the term, I think truly resonated me well. And this particular the program. And the very first lesson I learned in this country is that Americans always begin a speech or a talk with a joke. And the Chinese, on the other hand, is always begin with an apology. So given my agricultural background, I would like to apologize in advance, but at the same time, I want to share with you one joke, which I just picked up yesterday at the Ruth session. At the very end, I think Samina asked Ruth, what is the one characteristic that your husband, I believe is John, right, like or appreciate the most? And by the way, I forgot the exact wording. And what is the one characteristic that he likes or appreciates the least? So certainly I think Ruth, gave you a number of answers. So if Ruth was here if I were Ruth yesterday, or if you would, because Samina is going to leave earlier, so thanks God, I'm kind of relieved. Or if you were to ask me the same question today, my response to both would be being a strategy professor. Okay, and I think we have the best and the worst, or perhaps I should say that we have the most exciting and the most challenging of a profession at the same time. So the extent to which, under what condition is good and under what condition is the worst, and I will let Samina, maybe you can have another kind of, the sessions, we can continue the conversation. So By the way, Samina, I have to say, you are truly a wise person, and your question truly get into my lifelong pursuit of the power of one and the becoming ambiculture, of balancing various conflicting pieces of the different entities, sometimes even the good and the bad at the same time. Before I begin my conversation, and given now, and I will share with you where I'm coming from, interest, and so on. Let me say a few big ideas to begin our conversation. First, I am a Chinese, and I want to put Chinese in quote, not by ethnicity. Is truly, I consider Chinese as a way of thinking and this notion of balance. So I once said to my mentor, late Bill Newman, and the Newman Award, I think the Academy, doctors do the name of him. And from my viewpoint, Bill is more Chinese than 99% of my Chinese friends. Certainly this will upset a lot of people. Perhaps John, I hope you will not be offended, okay? So the first, I'm a Chinese. The second, I came from nowhere. And I will share with you my background. And thirdly, I'm a sports player. And that have a kind of, just the sponsorship, has made a profound impact on my career and the life. And then finally, my life is very simple. I only need to deal with 4 words: number 1, number 2, and the number 3, and the number 9. And the 1, I think Semina's smile is part 1. And the 2 is very much this ambiculture. And the 3 is the culture / value, strategy, and execution integration. And the 9 in the Chinese context is being sustainable and continue to go on to the next, the cycle. So I think that's the ending is the beginning is the ending. So the life just become, in a sense, circular. So before I continue, I'm wondering, is there any question before I begin to introduce my quote, Taiwanese or Chinese background? Let me begin by saying that I was born and raised in the most underdeveloped city in Taiwan until I was 17. And because of that humble beginning, I never had a chance to study at any of those prestigious schools, in Taiwan. And perhaps as a result, I was rejected by all the institutions in the US when I applied for my doctoral study, except my alma mater, University of Maryland. Actually, Joe, my first rejection came from Columbia, and I ended up spending 9 years in the Urich Hall. So, and this, the very humble beginning in Taiwan actually taught me quite a few lifelong lessons that have been a profound impact on my academic career and life. And most fundamentally, it defines who I am as a person, and then as a quote, scholar. I want to put the scholar in quote, because I think my conception of a scholarship is perhaps different from a lot of people who tend to take a more focused and perhaps more limited kind of, conception. And this actually go back to Hans, your original question, why I have been involved in so many different things. And some of the lesson I learned, including, for instance, being humble and appreciative, because we have nothing. And so anything small will make a huge differences. The second thing is very much other-centric, being very authentic, and always look at people's eyes, always look at people's reaction. And so Samina, so when I mentioned I was trying to anticipate your question, and certainly it's both personally, I came from that tradition, and also professionally is to anticipate, quote, competitors' response or opponents' response. And also being very adaptive and flexible. And finally is this entrepreneurial and innovative kind of nature. And I have to say, my off the beaten path beginning has allowed me to view the world from on the margin. And even today, and I have to admit, this, despite being in mainstream by many, many standards and a unique outlook for which I'm grateful. However, I still kind of look things from bottom up. So I think that very much always give me a different, quote, the vantage point. And because I came up in a resource constrained environment, and also I was so used to rejections, so that rejection by any journalist becomes, just so natural as a part of the life. And I have to fight to get ahead. And because of that, I take nothing for granted. At another level, and this quality also forced me always to think about what is the most important in life, and help me to be resilient and creative. And let me just offer a small example. We now live in the countryside of Charlottesville, Virginia, and our water is supplied by well. And where there's no electricity, there's no water. So an inconvenience that annoys my wife, who grew up in Taipei, the capital, to no end. By contrast, I truly enjoy it, but I cannot tell her. And because it reminds me of my childhood. I'm not only used to this kind of constrained environment, I thrive in it. And my humble beginnings also helped me to practice strategy and act like a strategist all the times. So I only teach the kind of strategy knowledge or wisdom that I have personally practiced. So it's not a knowledge, it's very much is a life experience sharing. So today, in academic sphere, I'm a very constant, as I just mentioned before, the journal rejection, and perhaps even enjoy them, because this type of professional challenge is akin to the trails of my everyday life. And because I live in a small town, the academic pressure was much less than what has experienced in the big cities in Taiwan in the 60s, where where competition was intense. For those of you, grew up in Asia, whether it's India or China or Thailand, I think getting into a good school, the competition is always tense. So I was quite free to do what I want to do outside the usual norms and the structures. And as an example, as a fourth grader, I decided I wanted to become a journalist. So my role models at that time were people like Walter Cronkite and Peter Jennings, because no one bothered me there. So I would, basically immerse myself at the local public library and read 20-some newspapers a day. And later, though, because for a variety of reasons, I did not pursue a journalism career. I continue to love, this profession, and also my newspaper reading habit throughout my career and life. My early interest in journalism, and let me come back to the academia, has had a significant impact on my academic career. For instance, some of my close friends knows I don't read much or even at all the literature, and especially because of the competitive dynamics, I have to be innovative. And however, whenever I do the literature review, I be able to skim with the comprehension. And then let me also share with you another example. And I know there was one question I forgot from either Mr. or Mrs. Huang, about the first 2 years of the doctoral program. I still remember, by the way, is Guoli Chen in the audience? I saw his name, he registered. I'd be very happy to share with you after the talk, because Don Hamburg and I, we discussed when you first came to join, Penn State. During my first year in the US, I spent a lot of time watching. How many of you know this TED couple? Is good. It's the Nightlines on ABC, and which broadcast from 11:30 to 12:30 a.m. It's not only I watch the show every day, but I also spend $260 a month, purchase the transcript. And in contrast, I limit my spending on food, $10 a week. So that means $40 a month. So this notion of being strategic in resource allocation, and I was not too bad. And TED couple is a master of interview and questioning. So I learned how to craft the questions in both my own research, writing, and teaching because of my daily exposure to couples' way of questioning. And actually, I gave this credit to him for my AMR, presidential speech publication. Let me also add another thing which I think Ha mentioned. Before I left Taiwan, I had another very rare opportunity to learn classical Chinese philosophy with the nephew of the last emperor in China. And during like 4 or 5 years, I had to read the entire work of 16, or most of the work of those 16 most famous philosophers between 707 and 221 BC, which was very much considered as the peak of the Chinese civilization. And so the people like Confucius and people like Lao Tzu and people like Sangzhu. So for instance, I read Sangzhu's The Art of War and 11 interpretations 7 times before I left Taiwan. So now the study of competitive dynamics become almost a no-brainer because I was, I am used to that kind of thinking. And then another thing, which again is something I did before I left Taiwan, I had the chance to meet with the professor who truly encouraged me to study in the US, the late Professor Zhang, Samina, and quite a few, the Michigan graduate. I think you should be proud to know that Michigan was the one American institution which set up the home management education in Taiwan in the early 70s. So Professor Zhang just returned to Taiwan, and after he got his PhD in organizational sociology from Michigan. So he tutored me privately, and I had to read the books like Robert Merton and Peter Block, and I have to say, I was unable to understand most of the stuff. Is difficult, especially Robert Merton's, writing is just so difficult. But to some extent, it helped me to get a flavor. And exactly because of this reason, I still remember in the mid-80s, the first time I ran into Henry Mintzberg. And I say to Henry, and because Henry's, the writing is very simple, straightforward, and easy to understand. So I thank, Henry, and because he writes so simply, and at least I can understand, what's the management or organization science is about. So I think that's very much just give you some big ideas about how I personally benefit because of my humble beginning, and because I was born in Taiwan. So to me, I feel this is unfair competition because I think I do have a locational advantage, because I just happened to be born in a very resource-constrained environment, and I happen to have the chance to study a master teacher. By the way, my Chinese philosophy teacher taught until 104, and he passed away at 106, and his students are not only those celebrities in Taiwan, including the former prime minister in Taiwan, but literally you go to any of the Ivy League institution in the US, and in the Chinese or history department, there will be at least a few of his students he has taught over the before he passed away in 2011. So that also gave me a very interesting kind of university affiliation background, and so that make my life very, very interesting. So for instance, when I joined Penn and Wharton several years ago, I was visited by Nathan Stevens, and actually Nathan published together with Joe Nesbitt, and this big and Stevens actually got his PhD from MIT in chemistry, but he was fascinated by the Chinese medicine, so he went to Taiwan to study Chinese medicine with my master teacher, and then later he changed his career to become a history professor at Penn. So that's the kind of things just make my my life very interested, and so I think that's perhaps it's a long answer to ask your very and to me I think it's a very meaningful question, and I thank you to ask this the most basic question, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be here, to be with you all. Yeah.
I wanted to maybe draw out another sort of early experience that you had when you were in the PhD program, because I believe that you were the first PhD strategy student at the University of Maryland, and your experience with Ken Smith, and how you what you learned as a PhD student from Ken as a junior faculty member, and sort of the challenge that you had with your own dissertation advisor and Dr. Payne, I believe. So can you share a little bit about that? Because I think that's another element of adversity, but you turn that into insight and experience, and it gave you resilience. So I think that'd be really interesting to share.
Again, I was most fortunate to study at Maryland. I don't think I was ready for any of the other school, and it's a very nurturing environment. And it also, by the way, Samina is Cynthia Lee is still on the faculty at the Northeastern. Yeah. Actually, by the way, the Professor Payne you mentioned, and Cynthia Lee was also his assistant. So I entered the doctoral program as an OB/OT student because at that time there was no strategy group. So I think that's to begin with, and I also so happened in my second semester, actually first semester, I took Ed Locke, and I don't know whether STRong is in the audience. I think Ed Locke is a very well accomplished scholars in organizational behavior. So whenever you bring up Maryland, I think a lot of emotion, a lot of memories and frustrations and setbacks is all happen at the same time. I don't think any doctor student would have the worst experience than myself. I lost two closest professors in my doctoral program. The first, I think you mentioned Frank Penn. And in one of the Monday faculty meetings, and he had a stroke. So I sent him to the hospital, and he never came back. And I will come back to Dr. Penn in a few minutes. And the second one is Dr. Ellen Nash, and who was the PhD program director. And he's a very supportive faculty members. And once he knew I play basketball. Oh, by the way, I never share this is perhaps once in my lifetime I can brag a bit. I once scored 44 points in a game. So perhaps it's because it played much shorter Taiwanese. So that's the reason, okay. So once Dr. Nash knew that I play basketball, so he organized the doctor students on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock to play basketball. And one Friday afternoons, and there were only two of us show up, so we went to play in the big gym. And then he fell on the floor. And then I sent him to the hospital. and he never left the hospital. So I think that's, so I don't think you can imagine anyone will have, but anyway, come back to Dr. Pan. I was close to him to the extent, except for signing his personal check, I did other things for him. It's like my, quote, American father. And I still remember 2 months before his passing, he passed away in October 1984. 2 months before his passing, I went to BWI, the Baltimore Washington International Airport, to pick him up. And he finished his visit in UK. And after, I dropped him off, and he gave me 2 papers. The one is Rachel Cave's 1984 American Economics, review papers, something like economic analysis and competitive advantage, something like that. So that's the first paper he gave to me. And then the second paper he gave to me was a working paper written by Ian McMillan. At that time, Mac was at NYU. He just left Columbia before he joined Wharton. And that's is truly the early days of his study competitive dynamics. So he studied 23 responses to one banking innovation by one of the New York banks. I believe it's Chase. I could be wrong. So he gave me these 2 papers and just told me that this is the future of strategic management. And for those of you who do not know Frank Paine, P-A-I-N-E, and he was the classmate of Dan Schendel, the founder of Strategic Management Society. They studied together at Stanford. And his book with the Penn and Anderson, 1975, that's very much one of the most popular strategy textbook in the 70s. So he gave me these 2 papers and just said to me, this is the future of strategic management. Again, I am Chinese. From the ethnic viewpoint, we listen to our teacher. So I developed the blind faith to what he said, even until today. So I think that's very much this whole competitive dynamics. And then the top part, he passed away 8 days before my first ever academic presentation with Ken Smith. And the 10th of October in Philadelphia, we were supposed, 3 of us were supposed to present this study. And so at that time, competitive dynamics was just 1 page, abstract, that's it. So again, it was a very humble beginning. And exactly for that reason, I'm deeply grateful, not only to him, to many people who helped me to get to this point. And now, certainly looking back, and competitive dynamics is well established. So to some extent, my doctoral program studies is at that time, which I think actually addressed in my Academy of Management Review paper with Don Hembrick in terms of the rise of academic field. And we take this social movement perspective, and then we use the field of strategic management as our point of references. So, and I still remember, and Bill Newman told me once, in the 70s, the intellectual boundary and the scope of business strategy or strategic management is the collection of Harvard cases. Whenever there's a new Harvard case, and the boundary of the strategy just will change. So I think the strategic management field has gone a long way. So I witnessed, firsthand, at that time, no one would think that the strategy field would survive. At that time, no one felt that, even, my competitive dynamics was just so unknown at that time. And it's not only I was interested in competition, I played all different kinds of competitive games, Chinese chess, bridge, badminton, table tennis, you just name it.
Can I ask a question about, you mentioned that you had a proposal or an idea of what competitive dynamics could be. And I want to jump to the AMR piece, the 1996 AMR piece. And I think that journey of how you developed the ideas and to then become the research program that we see today. But I think that there's an experience behind that paper that might be interesting for the participants, because again, it couldn't have been easy, right? And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Okay, let me take a look to see, because one of my MBA students, he registered. Let me take a look to see whether he is in the audience. Otherwise, I would ask him to share with the AMR 96 paper, because he read that paper, when the paper was still in a working paper, a draft. By the way, that's another long story in itself. Certainly, you all know, Jay Barney's 1991 Journal of Management seminal piece. And I think the number of citations is crazy. So that paper actually developed at the same time as my AMR 96 paper, at the same time. And so it was September of 1989. I just joined Columbia 2 months. So Wharton hosted an elite invitation 3 days workshop at by the way, the student of mine, Chris Wolf, actually just called me, and I want to come back to Chris because he is very relevant to Chavi. Maybe you should send a message to Chris and ask him to sign up and show up. I want him to speak to the group. And Chris now is a DBA student at the University of Florida. And let's come back to Chris because he is also part of the puzzle. So I was asked. By the way, there were only about 3 or 4 assistant professors. Most of them are very much like the giants, like Jay Barney, Dan Leventhal, Javier Singh, Berger Wennerfeld, among others. As a fresh PhD, I was asked to comment or criticize or review strategic group research. At that time, that's the hottest topic, and even in 1989 alone, there were 33 dissertation publications study strategic group. So I ask one question. How useful is a strategic group analysis for competitor analysis? So very truthfully, I share with the audience my conclusion is not useful at all. Certainly, I was not that bold, but the message is clear, because basically for strategic group analysis, you just use cluster analysis and they're trying to lump all those operational statistics together. And I can give you tons of examples. Those belong to the same strategic group, but they don't share in the same market. I think your recent the Journal of Management paper, this notion of asymmetry and this notion of overlap is very much part of that origin. So I was, let me use more professional term, I was severely criticized. And if I use my children's term, that it would be bully. I was a bully to the extreme because I challenged the prevailing paradigm at that time. The one is strategic group, another one, the related paradigm, is Porter's industry structure analysis, and so on. And I have to say, some of my very respected senior colleagues truly behave to the extent. Oh, by the way, Tony is here. Tony Tong is here. Not Jay Barney. Jay is always very supportive. Not Jay Barney. Okay. To the extent the host Habir Singh apologized to me on behalf of those senior colleagues, and I feel so bad because I was 2 months into my assistant professorship. I drove 2 hours to a small town, and I bought myself. And actually, it so happened, originally I don't use this station, I use the other one. You can look at that. Did you see that? Did you see this poetry?
Is it your painting of a ship?
Yeah, it's a ship, is the storming ocean. So from that point on, I think this poetry hanging in my study just remind me academia is tough, like life. So this also remind me one of my favorite movie, Witness. This John Book and this Amish gentleman. And after John finished his things, returned to Philadelphia Police Department, and I think this old gentleman said to John Brooke, say something like, "Watch out, those Englishmen." Okay, it's similar. So it's always remind me, life and our journey can be very tough. Truly depending
Ming-Jer,
on, yes.
May I just interrupt you very quickly, because I know we're near the midpoint, and I would like to just take a quick 2 minutes to take a screenshot of all of the participants for STR, if that's okay. And we'll leave everyone hanging with respect to the how you overcame the initial resistance to your ideas. So if all of the participants could just very quickly turn on your video, and we're going to have just a quick shot, and then we can continue the conversation. Thank you so much for turning on your videos. Thank you.
So maybe I can count to 3 and everyone can look at the screen.
Okay.
And so you know when to smile, okay? 1, 2, 3, cheese. Perfect. Thank you, Ha.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know, actually, Ha is good. Seminar will leave in 6 minutes, so I'm almost over, right? Okay. Let me finish. I just saw Chris. It's so nice to see you. You know, so let me continue this AMR journey. And so based on that conference, I wrote the paper for the Academy submission in 1990. It was rejected. And then I asked my colleagues, I still remember, Kathy Harrigan gave me the comments. This is a great tech note for SMJ. It was, I had no theory. I had no theory at all. It's just, you know, I do have some illustrative examples. I have some numbers, but there was no theories at all. So it was rejected. So I play with the paper for Chris, welcome. We are talking about the paper that I would like you to add your 2 cents, okay? And Chris, my MBA student of 95, 96, I think just joined us. So I started playing with the paper. Run of the runs, run, and so on. So my first submission was for the Oak Science special issue on hypercompetition. And it was accepted for publication. And I decided to withdraw from Oak Science. And at that time, I had no clue what's the destiny of this paper. And we can come to perhaps, you know, people were always, you know, interested in why you even gave up a publication. And I can even share with you, I still remember one Monday early morning, and I think, you know, the Zhao would tell you, you know, Don Hambrick always come to the office very early, like 7 o'clock, and 8 o'clock normally, or normally 9 o'clock. So I walked into his office. So I told him the things I was about to do. I remember that it was early October. And Don responded, just say, Ming-Jer, you are not tenure yet. I would like you to reconsider your decision. And I have to be honest, I was very direct and non-Chinese in a sense. So I told Don, I'm here to inform you my decision. I'm not here to consult with you. So I think the rest become the history. By the way, I did consult with my lifetime mentor, Bill Newman, over the weekend. Not only he fully supported me, but also he suggested me to pull out quickly and also gracefully. So I think that's completely separate issue I think we can discuss. And then I started playing with the paper again and sent to the Academy of Management Review. And not only the paper received the division's Best Paper Award, but also the AMR Best Paper Award 1996. There are 2 things truly pleased me. The first is the paper was accepted in the first round by Susan Jackson. And to my knowledge, even until today, Hambrick and Mason, 1984, is another paper I know, the only another paper I know accepted in the first one. Secondly, this is the first time and perhaps the only time AMR will publish numbers. So I have one appendix, and which truly the origin of this whole paper still intact as a part of the paper. And certainly I was also so encouraged that one of the most popular strategy book written by Mike Hitt, Duane Ireland, and Bob Hoskinson, and has a whole chapter basically just use that paper as the anchor research. And then I want to turn to Chris. Let me share with you, Chris was my, at that time, at Columbia, I had the privilege to start offering an elective for second year on competitive dynamics seminar. And I only took 12 students a section, originally started from one section, and then it ended up with 3 sections. And for each 12 students, I normally get 80 or 100 applications. So basically it's highly competitive to get into, it's really the best of Columbia, so I had the chance. So when Chris read the AMR 96 paper, at that time was a working paper. Chris, thank you so much for joining. Where are you? Are you in Florida? Are you in New York? Unmute yourself. You can use your cell phone because Samina, I think you should leave. I think your thing is much important to me. Chris, go ahead.
I think he isn't muted on our side, so he must be muted on his side.
Okay, Chris, I cannot hear you.
No.
Okay, let me tell you the story. One Saturday morning at 7 o'clock, I was in my office and the phone rang, and here came Chris Wolf. Now he's doing, so Chris just finished his first year at the Booz Allen Hamilton in the tech sector as a consultant. So he used AMR 96 for his first big consulting project, which took him 18 months. Originally, he just wanted to leave a message in my office and did not anticipate I was in my office at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. So that's very much finished this. I can continue. I think this paper truly defines my scholarship and truly live up to my own hope for myself, as a person and as a scholar, and let alone the same paper, quite a few, core concepts and ideas become so central to competitive dynamics research. For instance, like the awareness, motivation, capability in predicting competitive responses and action. For instance, like market commonality and resource similarity in analyzing competitors. So integrate both your internal resource capability as well as your external market profile. And also the idea of competitive asymmetry. So I think you address in your research. And so I think this paper actually serve multiple purposes. And yeah, again, it all came from a very strong rejection and pushback by the field. But I did not give up. And the irony of this whole thing, originally I used the excuse that because of the hyper-competition special issue as a product, your production cycle. So I cannot not live up to your production cycle. I withdraw the paper. It turned out that AMR publication came before the special the hyper competition special conference, and even Ari Lewin, the big editor at that time of Oak Science, called me up one day and wanted me to reconsider my decision to withdraw from Oak Science. And I told him at that time, unfortunately, it was accepted by AMR already. And so that's the kind of the story. Let me talk a little bit. So how I hope
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
There is a follow-up question to your that I think is really appropriate right now, which is, do you have any advice for junior scholars in terms of dealing with rejection? And maybe that has something to do with all of these experiences that you had. Maybe some of it might come from your co-authors, the way to approach these negative events. But would you have any advice to dealing with rejection?
Yeah, I think those two or three questions are all related. I think one of the mistakes that we all make is that we let other people, our colleagues, our reviewers, our editors, to define what we want to study. And I think that the piece of the advice I want to share with the junior colleague would be, we should be in the driver's seat. So follow your own interest and listen to your own heart. And it's you yourself to decide where to publish and under what condition to publish. And it's not the journal editor. So I think that's the kind of things I think I kind of learned early on in my life because of my humble Taiwanese background and so on. If I let other people to tell me what to do, I think I would become no one. And I know quite a few of us have children, and I don't know how many of you watch Mr. Rogers. I think those, and for those of you who watch Mr. Rogers, I think there's a line like there's only one Zhao, there's only one Ha, there's only one Tony, there's only one Ming-Jer in the world. And I think you should precious who you are and what you have. Your interest, your passion, and your skill set, we all have limitations. But once you fix what you can control, you can always overcome all those residuals. So I think that's one thing. You also asked about research collaboration. And I think a related issue for doctor student is working with your dissertation advisors. So I think Zhao was there when I raised the number of questions about the co-authors and so on. That's a separate big issue. But I so happen did not have the luxury to work with, quote, big name professors to begin with, for my doctorate dissertation. Not like Tony, you have the privilege with J. Barney. Certainly that itself has many merits, but it also carries with certain liabilities. And Ken Smith, when we first started working, only second year after he got his PhD at University of Washington. So in many ways, he was not established at that time, and he was insecure. And I have to be very honest. And insecure in two senses, which I also have direct implication, which I think I shared with some of you before. And let me give you one example. The first example would be, I will come back to the research collaborator. That's another big story, and also important lesson for all of us to think about. I still, for many of my close advisors, I wrote 2 dissertations. It's not an understatement. I still remember I already started my Columbia appointment, and in early October, and I gave my dissertation to my committee. And after the 3 days after I gave my dissertation to my committee members, I realized there was a fatal mistake in my statistical analysis. So I went to Ken, and I said, I found this mistake. And for whatever reason, we never discussed about this issue. He said, you should not change, and you cannot change. And this is the contract you have with your committee, with me, and I will back you up if there's any problem and questions. And this is where my classical Chinese philosophy came into play handy. And one of the 4 books is called the Zhongyong. It's very much the middle way, the Chinese way of balance. So I did not listen to him. I redid all the analysis, and I started completely. So for 4 weeks, I worked like hell. And I still remember the dissertation defense was at 12 o'clock in one of the afternoons, and I have to drive 30 minutes. So I barely made it to the dissertation classroom. And then later, in retrospect, had I not made the change, I don't think I can pass the defense, because there were 2 professors raised that question. So Ken Smith told me later on, and he said, after you presented the second slide, I told myself, something is going on. There's some sense. So anyway, and then the committee asked me to rewrite all those chapters, and in light of my revised analysis. And 2 years ago, by the way, Ken is a great person. 2 years ago, I finally had the courage. I say to him, and I called him from Taiwan when I was visiting my mom, and who is now 93 years old. I called Ken, and finally I told him, because he always say to me, you are not aggressive. To the extent he even discouraged me to apply for the PhD at the faculty position at Columbia. Basically, she say they won't even talk to you. So I did not listen, and I say to Ken, and for a Chinese, being aggressive means you develop your inner strength. You don't reveal externally, which is completely different from or opposite to, the some, the more, some of the more, Western kind of, ideas. So I think that's perhaps answer your first question. And the second question, about the research collaboration. Again, I'm a Chinese, so I only work with, quote, friends. We have to become friends first. So I get to know you, you get to know me, and then so we decide to work together. And certainly, I work with quite a few well-established scholars. And as of today, I still have yet have the opportunity to work with Jay Barney, even though Jay was always one of the most supportive kind of colleagues. And I almost decided to join Texas A&M because of Jay. And let me share with you, for instance, how I started collaborating with Danny Miller. And I still remember, it was, again, also Wednesday. I normally, when I was at Columbia, I went to school very early, normally like 5 o'clock, because in New York, it's so convenient. So it was like 7 or 8 o'clock, I bumped into Jim Frederickson, and he was about to leave Columbia to join Texas Austin. And by the way, he passed away. He passed away last year, and he was someone I'm also deeply grateful, which I want to come back, because he completely redefined the way I deal with the reviewers. And I want to come back with the Frederickson tutorial, and I want to come back to that point. So Jim say, Ming-Jer, Danny Miller will come to visit. Do you want to have lunch together? And again, I just joined Columbia. And as a doctoral student, I had heard so many stories about Danny. Very bizarre. It's like a Phantom of Opera. He only appeared at midnight when the whole school closed down. And some people even think there's no Danny Miller. Danny Miller is the empirical side of Henry Mintzberg. Okay, so there was just all those, rumors and speculations, stories about Danny, and so he was a giant. So when Jim say, I immediately say no, he is just too much a giant for me, to even get to know at that time. So I told Jim, and I said, unfortunately, I have a lunch appointment today, so I will not be able to join you. And then, I was in my office, and I just reflect, and I just laugh at me. It's kind of, silly, given I already joined Columbia, and for whatever reason, they like what I did, and all those different kind of things. By the way, I had a great time truly at the Columbia, and it's very much the place like pay for performance. So my pay adjustment is always on the top 1% of the school. So I think that's a secondary story. So I truly can benefit so much, and especially my lifetime mentors and so on. So, and I said, that's silly. So I call Jim back around 11 o'clock, and I said, Jim, my appointment is canceled, so I can join you for lunch today. And then, and after lunch, Danny and I would talk for 4 hours or 5 hours, and the rest becomes history. The rest become history. And let me come back to Jim. He spent 30 minutes with me, and Jim is so methodical, by the way, and he has the calendar book. Even if his wife want to have dinner with him, and she has to set up the appointment. So just give you the background. So it turned out that the 30 minutes he spent with me truly completely changed the way I deal with the reviewers. So for instance, I am extremely thorough to the extent that I will receive the comments like, this is the most comprehensive responses I have ever received in my 25 years of career, and so on. And by the way, Danny Miller would never let me to write the response, and because he cannot live with that, I pay attention to all the details. But it was heavily influenced, and thanks to Jim, and I certainly thank to him now. He's in heaven. Yeah. So that's
Ming-Jer, if I may have Nikisha ask a related question, which has to do with how we're interacting now remotely. So I'll turn it over to Nikisha for a question.
Go ahead.
Are you on mute? Or yeah, please.
Yes, right.
Unmute.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Hi, Dr. Chen. Thank you so much for this. I'm a second-year student going into my second year of the doctoral program at Baruch College and a Columbia Business School alum. So
I remember.
I just wanted to ask, with the change to working remotely, how do you think that's going to impact the organization and / the firm in the long and short term? And then also, will remote work impact international business? And if so, how?
So because some of the sentences were broken, so let me make sure that I get the gist of your question. So you are asking how the distance, the working, and then even to some extent relate to whole pandemic will change, how we work in academia. Is that?
Well, in terms of the organization, like how do you think these, like working remotely will impact firms? And
okay.
Yeah, and then how do you think working remotely will change, if at all, international business?
Yeah. First of all, I just finished an executive program with a group of Asian executives, and also academic conference. The opening question I always ask, I do a poll. I think how you might have seen the poll I put together. So, and the question I asked, what do you think about the COVID-19? Number one is business as usual. And then another extreme, the opposite, would be my company and myself completely revamp myself and our company. So you always have these two extremes. I personally think and feel that the COVID-19 will completely change how business is conducted. It's not only international business. That's a completely separate issue. But from the organizational viewpoint, because first of all, let me just give you, I just learned 2 days ago, I forgot it's either Apple or Google, I believe it's Google, just announced they will not return to work until the summer of 2021. And all the big tech companies, for the next 5 years, they are thinking at like 50% of the workforce will be online workers. So basically, they just work remotely. So that's the kind of, you know, the change I think we are talking. It's not only in the tech sector. I think it's truly across the board. And also, I think before the conversation, Ha and I, we had this conversation, I feel so appreciative. Now I can do so many things with the online kind of, you know, structure. Nakisha, let me say to you, I did not, by the way, my Zoom, you know, coach actually is also in the audience. Chavi is one of my second-year students who just graduated. Chavi, you can show up and say hi. And I want to take this advantage because he will be applying for the doctor program in OB, unfortunately, and not in strategy. So that's the reason I decided to keep him for this year, and he has been helping me. So I knew nothing about cell phone. I knew nothing about iPad. Now I have like two or three tutors helping me on all the three, you know, devices, and because now, you know, I can start decompose my time. So some of the workers, so they are so used to working at home, they realize what the online, you know, the work can offer. So we are going to see the wave of those talented people start basically breaking apart their time. So rather than 40 hours a week, I'm willing to work for 4 companies, 10 hours a week. And I can do whatever kind of I want. And I can even pursue my personal interest in, for instance, like in my case, I can even spend, you know, 10 hours and do consultants, you know, for those, you know, media company. And because I would like to do interviews, I started interviewing some of my very well accomplished, you know, executive students. And then I start writing cases. So I think it's forever change. So, but unfortunately, academia is a very conservative. And I have to say, unfortunately, you know, the lack of leadership has become a big challenge for many organizations. Unless you truly have a visionary leaders on the top, people will not think, you know, pandemic and COVID-19 is the golden opportunity to truly globalize any organization, any company. And I can give you quite a few companies that I work with or know well, taking advantage of the tech. And I think between 5 or 8 companies I'm aware of, the average growth of over the last 6 months range from 40% to 150%. So I think I'm, you know, originally I'm a very low tech person. Now I completely transform myself, and I'm truly serious. And next year I'm going to, I have already signed up with a former student of mine, now working in the tech sector at McKinsey, and he and I were going to offer a new course in business strategy in the big data era. So I think that's the kind of thing. So I'm ready for that.
Wow.
I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. So by the way, even this Zoom recording, let me see. Even this recording is really the big data. You have all the information you need, and you can watch. Excuse me. Okay. I think you can watch anytime you want.
Yes. You also Christian is back, but I'm not sure if we've overcome the technical difficulties. Just to maybe connect to the final big area that you're working on right now, which is ambulatory management.
Okay.
Is this an area where you can focus on the many different activities that you do, research, your teaching, and then your consulting or your executive education engagement? How do you manage? I mean, I'm hearing that the technology is going to make you even more productive, which is great. Do you see any other strategies that you've employed that help you to overcome some of the contradictions that we find in doing, where these activities are different or seemingly different, how you integrate them and kind of underpinning your idea of oneness? I think this would be really helpful for some of us who are maybe a little bit later in our careers, who are being asked and are interested in doing diverse activities.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I think there's this notion of the staging of different phase of the career. I think certainly is very important. But I think the even more important is that you have to develop the right perspective and the right attitude to begin with. And because of this, because of my study of Chinese classic, I once had, I think Zhao, may remember, I think I once had a conversation with Andy Vandervan, and I said to Andy, your 2007 book, Engage Scholarship, there's a redundant word of engage. And for Chinese, a scholar has always have to be engaged. And there's always has a very strong application orientation by, historical or traditional Chinese scholars. So and let me use we, because I very much consider myself a traditional Chinese scholar in that sense. Unless we can truly practice what we study, we will not consider us a scholar. So exactly for this reason, during the pandemic, I spent a lot of time, again, resource allocation, distribute masks around the globe. And how, actually, I know one of your most proud, the alums is the ex-CEO and the chairman of Accenture, right? Pierre, yeah. And even one of the board members of Accenture in England even received a large amount of masks because of my humble, effort, along with a former student of mine. So there's always an application orientation. And let me give you another example. Certainly, I think for those of you of us at the session yesterday, I raised this question last week. I think the U.S. announced to shut down, China's, Houston consulate, and in response, a typical competitive dynamics behavior, and in terms of prediction, China, closed the Chengdu consulate. So my humble beginning to study this very complicated phenomenon is the following. First of all, we have quite a few Chinese in the audience. I know how you feel at this time, and you're wondering and so uncertain, even more uncertain to compare to the people from other countries and other origins. And so I very much want to show my moral support to you all. And so when the trade war began in March of 2018, I wrote and also published a Chinese article. And actually the article even was cited and also reprinted by one of the top 5 policy think tank. There was one in Korea and so on. And so I published that paper as my first step trying to understand, even though I have been studying this phenomenon for many years and have been thought about this phenomenon for many years. And then in fact, I'm going to finish a 4-part case series. And just by listening at the title of the case, you would know what it means. The title of the case is like ABCD, is U.S.-China tensions in class. This is a real story, happened in one of our second year class in April. And at the very end of the class, I think the professor asked about what was the innovation in China during the Cultural Revolution time or pre-Cultural Revolution time. So immediately in the chat box, there was one comment by an American student, is that it's nothing but stealing technology and the claim to be innovation. So it's a very much typical, and actually the whole thing happened the next day after Trump started using China Wuhan virus. So there's definitely correlation between the environment and the incidents. So I decided as a teacher and educator, I think it's time for the professional and the mature, MBAs or business student to have this open discussion. So I wrote the A case is, I was quite pleased in terms of the setup. The A case was a Chinese student who was not in the classroom. Oh, by the way, the incident is the Chinese student in class and responded in the chat box say, during this tough time, we're supposed to support each other. And then after the class, they exploded, they mobilized, they put together a petition presented to the dean. So I completely disguised this case. So I think this case can be widely used by many schools, because this is going to be the future for us, the new global reality for the next two or three decades at the minimum. And so that's the kind of thing. And then so the A case was the Chinese who was not in the class and was asked to sign the petition. So he listened to his American friends. He also listened to his Chinese friends. And then the question is, what should he do? The second case is about this poor professor, happened to be a Chinese quote strategy professor. By the way, it's not my class, okay? So it's actually in economic class, whatever. So and then when he returned home, and he's not tenured yet. So he's under institutional pressure to conform, and also he's also under domestic pressure that his wife say, you came from China, you should take care of the Chinese student, especially at this time. So he has domestic pressure. And then the C case is even more interesting. The dean, after 3 or 4 months in August, before he left. Chris, I think you can keep silent for now, or I will chat after this. Okay.
I'm sorry, man. It has been a while.
Don't worry. Okay. Don't worry. Okay. No worry. Okay. So the C case is the dean before he left for China to attend the Asian Board meeting. He got a letter from the biggest donor, the Chinese donor, and complained about the things happened in April, and then asked him to explain. So what should the dean respond? And finally, the epilogue and so on. So how I think this is a typical example how I integrate research, teaching, consulting, and practice. And in terms of the service component, and I still remember when I was at Columbia, as an associate, I was asked to chair another chair. Don Hembrick was the official chair, but I was responsible for the faculty recruiting. I think that year was the year Ranjay Gulati, Rita McGrath, Ashish Nanda. It's really the most competitive year. And after I finished that recruiting work, and Mike Tushman said to me, this is the least political year in all his 18 years at Columbia. The previous year, there was one faculty member say bad things about another faculty member in front of the candidate. So it was terrible. So, so judges laughed, okay. So anyway, so from my viewpoint, I was influenced by people like Bill Newman, like Don Hembrick. If you want to be good, it's better that you're good on all fronts. As a teacher, as a researcher, as a service contributor, and as a consultant. So I think that's paying attention to the practice. Certainly, it's very easy to say, but it's difficult to execute. And just to put you into the perspective, and how the reason I have my first question actually is Chavi helped me to design the survey question, is how many miles, unused miles that you have in your account. My unused miles is about 700,000 miles. Okay. I visit my mom 4 times a year since 2005. I'm the oldest child in the family. I'm supposed to be home. She's supposed to be with me to take care of the family, but I can't. It's the tough balance between, the things truly excite me, and versus the family obligation and so on. So that's one thing. So I can bundle things together. So when I'm doing consulting work, this is the week I do it. And this is the week I do all those service. I'm also on the university senate. That's also, very major responsibility domestically, especially during this time, especially being part of Thomas Jefferson University. I think this is also a very tough time, at the university and in the US. So I tend to integrate all the different things together. So these are three, I call the trio: the culture, strategy, and execution. The culture also include your values, and then strategy and execution. And it's basically, you need to think through. So the time management is the minimum. So I'm extremely strategic in terms of the use of my time. And I also like to do a lot of big thinking, especially I'm up on the air a lot. So that's the time I think this big. And so strategy to me is very much forward looking. And I'm very pleased to say before anyone, even before Goldman Sachs, I spotted Jack Ma in 1999 and 2000. I invited him to come to Wharton and then give an East-West.com conference in New York. At that time, he only had 80 people and 800,000 renminbi and in Hangzhou. And today, if you look up, and so certainly now is a $2 million kind of question, how would you be able to spot him? Again, it's all through hard work. I work with a group of 6 very talented undergraduate students at Wharton through almost 2 or 3 months of research. And again, the power of one. And so the question is, if I were to invite one business executive or entrepreneur in China, who should I invite? Certainly at that time, people like Haiers, founder Zhang Ruiming, and we start communicating at that time. But so that's also this humble beginning truly helped me to think very differently. I don't play by book, to say the least. So I like to think in a very unconventional way, and that's very much the result of the competitive dynamics as a research topic or academic field, and that's also very much how I do a lot of different things. I hope I answered your questions.
I did. Oh, thank you very much. What we're going to do now is we're going to turn it. Oh, I'm going to turn it over to Zhao because she has some questions for you. These are coming from Samina apparently, so this is a gift.
Yes.
Wow.
Samina.
Thanks, Har, and thanks, Ming-Jer. It's always a pleasure, and such stories. I truly enjoyed it. So now I have the pleasure to ask Samina's, and let me emphasize Samina's fun questions. So we're gonna do it in a rapid fire fashion.
Okay.
So Ming-Jer, what's your favorite dessert?
A pecan pie.
That's great.
Good. And the second one, if you want to add, is bread pudding.
Love it. Second, you've traveled, around the world. So what is your favorite city?
I think that's a good question. I would say London, because it's so ambicultural. It's a very ambicultural. By the way, let me interrupt. Actually, I studied French, and I even had a Belgian roommate. Originally, I wanted to study in France, but I ended up in the wrong continent and have been stuck here, fortunately or unfortunately, for too many years. Okay, sorry for interruption.
No, that's great.
So
London and
Paris is always,
yeah.
very high on my list. Yeah.
Right.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
So number 3, would you choose to live near mountains or oceans?
I think that's a good question. Depending on my mood, okay.
We can have both, right?
Okay. But by the way, if I have to choose between the two, I would say ocean, because I grew up this underdeveloped city in Taiwan, it only took me 10 minutes walking to the ocean. So I always love to watch the ocean. And also the ocean helped me to feel like still connected with my hometown.
Yeah, that's great. You know, nothing better than home. So you mentioned that you play basketball.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite college or NBA basketball team?
That's great. Okay. It used to be Maryland, Terrapins, until it left ACC. I kind of lost interest. Okay. And in terms of the professional team, my favorite is Boston Celtics. Okay. Whether it's Larry Bird and those kind of folks, it's just always. And then also for those people have a connection with Maryland, I graduated the same year. Len Bias, the first pick by Boston Celtic, passed away, the star player. So Celtic is always
Celtic.
fun. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you teach, you mentioned the importance of practice, and you teach many executives and write many cases. So if you were asked to be a CEO today, in which industry would you want to participate and why?
Educational. It's not what I want to participate. It has been in my mind for many years, and actually, for your information, a group of 70 or 80 Chinese executive, very well accomplished students, even set up the academy, originally called MJC, or Ming-Jer Academy, and I forced them to change it to the Oneness Academy. So it's very much in my mind. And I personally think that we screw up. And I should not say that. I always want to supplement with alternative perspective and approach. So I hope to be in a position to do something to supplement for those things that traditional academic institution perhaps fail. And to me personally, the Chinese educational challenge began 200 years ago when it gave up this private tutorial kind of study. So to some extent, that's something I very much would like to reestablish. Perhaps, I'm ahead of the time, and perhaps I'm too behind the time, but this is something is very much in my mind and in my heart.
That's great. Love to, hear more about it next time. So last one, if you could have dinner and conversation with a person from the historical past, who would it be?
I'm sorry. Could you please just repeat? I just saw another. Okay.
Yeah. So if you could have dinner and conversation with somebody from historical past, somebody from before, who would it be?
That's interesting. And actually I asked this question in class, but it's kind of interesting that now you ask the same question. I would like to have conversation with Confucius. Because I would ask him how many musical instruments you play today, those are digital instruments. My understanding or my reading of Confucius, he's so ahead of his time and even our time. And many of his ideas are so in tune with the digital world. So basically, for instance, like Zhao Yunao, the dragon has no head, is one of such. So in the digital world, everyone is equal. But unfortunately, we pick up the negative side of that. So there are so many misinformation, kind of, rumors, scandals, and politicians utilize that, irresponsible person utilize that. So I would truly like to have a conversation with him. And the things I truly want to ask, say, please give me some wisdom.
Love it, Confucius.
I need your inspiration because we are in big trouble in many ways.
That is fantastic. So thank you so much for spending time with us.
So Joe.
Yes.
So can I get a certificate, pass, Samina's, the tough, test?
I will pass,
need a
I'll pass on the note.
from the division, and I want to have the signature of all the EC members. That would mean so much to me.
Thank you so much for doing this, with us. And
by the way, there's one question, John. I will let you to make the translation. I saw there was one question from the audience.
Shelby. From
yes.
Shelby, yeah.
Okay, what is my favorite food in Taiwan? Maybe Shelby, I will let the two of you to translate. 五根肠旺.
Oh, okay. I won't try. Just know that it's delicious and ask for it when you're in Taiwan next time.
Oh, maybe I missed the most. Okay, go ahead.
So Shelby, what do you think?
It's not typical Taiwanese. It's more like the combination of Sichuan, Chinese, and so on. Yes. Okay, go ahead. Translation.
I will do one better. I believe a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I have included
nice.
a link to a picture.
Okay, good. Okay, that's good. And John, what's your translation?
I don't know.
Okay, John, let me also, thank her by changing my favorite Taiwanese food a bit. Is the steam and fried frog, and how actually Chinese and French both eat frog, right?
Yes.
Yeah. My last visit to India, they treat me with a very nice frogs. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for letting us do this, and let me pass it back to Ha to do the closing.
Wow. Oh, thank you. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm so pleased that we were able to bring out some of those highlights and some of your wisdom. Thank you for spending the time with us. And I want to thank everyone, all the participants, everyone who signed up to join us. Thank you so much. Yeah,
truly, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and for taking your time and interest, and I truly appreciate. I can now very happy to share with the audience. And Ha and I exchanged email at 4:55 and 5:10 o'clock this morning, right? Okay. Good.
Yeah. So this was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Likewise. Yeah. Bye-bye.